It doesn't matter if it's been 2 hours or 2 days, send your crew in there. So we have an opportunity to get smarter about when and where to clean. And then we can even automate some of the disinfection.
Today, I'm fulfilling my promise to you with another amazing success story. Eli Harris joins me today. Eli, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I've been really excited about this ever since I heard you on Steve Sims' podcast, I think it was, which was an amazing story. I was walking my dog and I was like, okay, I got to reach out and try to connect with Eli. So if you're not familiar with Eli and you haven't heard of him yet, you'll be happy you did today, and here's why. Eli Harris is the president and co-founder of R0, a company that designs hospital-grade disinfection solutions for the day-to-day realities of modern businesses. Launched in the early months of the 2020 coronavirus pandemic, R0 has grown rapidly and attracted more than $60 million from investors. That's like in a little over a year. It's phenomenal. Prior to R0, Eli co-founded EcoFlow Tech in China after meeting a fellow Californian in a bar. He entered the bar as a Fulbright scholar and left as a budding entrepreneur with an idea to transform the portable energy storage industry with renewable battery-based power solutions. Things were going great until Eli and his company ran into trouble with the Chinese government. We'll learn all about that later. Eli is an Amherst College graduate with a degree in Mandarin Chinese with a focus on international development and business, a Forbes 30 under 30 entrepreneur, and a person we should all keep our eyes on. Eli, I ask every guest the same question to get started, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Thank you, Mike. That was quite a flattering bio. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, as you know, if you listen to Steve's podcast, it was definitely not all rainbows and sunshine. Being an entrepreneur is definitely not as sexy as it sounds. I started my career, I'm quite young, but I feel like I've packed a lot in. I'm 28 this year. I was 21 years old and got a Fulbright scholarship in Beijing. Went out to mainland China and I stayed for almost 8 years. I started out public sector. I was a little rosy-eyed, naive, and thought I wanted to work in foreign service or maybe hold public office. What I didn't realize is that holding that position, you really have a fiduciary to a national mandate, and you are there to execute a mandate. In my own again, rosy-eyed ambitions of the influence I could have on shaping a new generation of global youth that doesn't see borders, I think was a little naive and really was not the function of that role. So as Mike alluded to, I walked into a bar and that ended up turning into a job down south at DJI in Shenzhen. DJI is the world's largest drone manufacturer. And I went down south to Shenzhen. At the time, they had more than 3,000 employees. They had less than a dozen non-Chinese employees. And during my time in China, I learned Mandarin fluently, which I'm very proud of because I worked really hard for that. Just raw thousands and thousands of hours of memorization and getting up early to study. And I think just inherently in being an American on the ground in Shenzhen and speaking Mandarin fluently, I was given a lot more authority and responsibility than I could command at my age in the US. It allowed me to kind of accelerate my career trajectory, and I love that. My dad always told me that if you're doing a job you're qualified for, you're doing the wrong job, and I love that. So I dove in the deep end, and I got a pretty significant role there to help build their commercial drone business in North America and Europe, and understand how we could use drones in public safety, construction, mining, various industrial segments. Agriculture was a big one. And one thing I learned is I went to 16 countries during that time, and I was working with a lot of Fortune 100 companies trying to understand how they could use drones in their applications. And if you're a hobbyist, flying a drone for 20 minutes on the beach, taking a selfie, 20 minutes of battery life is great. If you're trying to map an oil pipeline or a large farm, you got to keep a drone in the air a lot longer. So I started working very closely with the battery engineers, and what initially started out as an idea to build a lithium ion drone recharging hub quickly pivoted into our own venture to try to build a large, high capacity lithium ion battery that could be recharged universally from solar, wind, or even just a standard wall outlet, and can actually store enough energy and have enough output to compete with a Honda gas generator. And that was our mission. Can we displace the Honda gas generator? So I was 24 years old, and I left DJI with 2 Chinese engineers. And the 3 of us incorporated the company in Shenzhen, and we went out to build a lithium-ion battery energy storage company that can compete with Honda. And over the next 3.5 years, I served as CEO of the company with my 2 partners as the CTO and the chief product officer. And we raised a lot of money. We did 4 rounds of venture capital funding while I was there. We built 2 manufacturing plants from scratch. We ended up hiring over 100 employees, and we shipped more than 200,000 products to 37 countries. The truth is, though, while we were scaling and growing quickly, batteries are very capital intensive, and we were not profitable. We were raising and growing. The capital markets tightened, and we had to raise more money, and we were in a tough position. After 3.5 years of running this company as CEO and putting my whole heart into this, working 7 days a week, 16-hour days, I mean, it was my whole identity. We ended up raising a small round from a very domestic, state-owned institution in China. And with that round, unbeknownst to me, I was totally blindsided, and I was fired from my own company. After 3.5 years of founding this, building this, I gave my whole heart to this. And after building 2 manufacturing plants, over 100 employees, multiple rounds of funding, hundreds of thousands of products, I was shown the door. And with that, I was given a very nominal buyout for my equity in the company. And less than a year later, that company is now a unicorn. They are valued over $1 billion. And I left, and I was angry, sad, frustrated, humiliated, ashamed. I came back to the States after almost 8 years in mainland China. I started seeing a therapist, spent a year in psychotherapy, reconnected with family, just kind of started to rebuild my self-esteem. And I have spent so long being angry and sad and ashamed and embarrassed. And just about a year later, when the pandemic happened, I got in touch with 2 mentors of mine, both entrepreneurs, and the 3 of us launched this new venture, R0. In the past 1.5 years, it's just been an absolute rocket ship. And I only now, the whole time, I would preach to myself, the experience will be worth it, the experience will be worth it. And I never felt that. My feelings never caught up with that logic. And only now, for the first time, as this 1.5 years has just skyrocketed, I'm finally able to see that manifest and believe that and feel it. That advice you always hear about the experience and the journey. And I feel like the last 18 months of success, it's not just the last 18 months of hard work, it's the manifestation of those 8 years of sacrifice, struggle, pain, sadness, long nights. I'm only now starting to be grateful for that experience.
So you gave us a ton of stuff there. I want to dig into a few things if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, so I'll talk till the cows come home. So you got to stop me. Okay. You got to start. You got to just feel free to interrupt. I'll just keep going. Okay,
fair enough. And fitting, since I'm in Wisconsin, to use the cow analogy. That's good. This first position that you had with the drone company, you learned Mandarin, as you said. I'm wondering what your Mandarin was like when you first got there. Did you know, what was it like? Because I understand that's a difficult language to learn, and you said you were proud of how much you had, worked to become fluent in it. But what was it like when you got there, and how were you treated when you got there versus when you were fluent? Because I don't think many people have an idea of what that might be like in China.
Yeah, so I started learning in college when I went to my undergraduate at Amherst. I was interested in international relations, diplomacy, and I figured languages are very useful skills. And I thought if I was going to learn any language, I might as well learn Chinese. I didn't know anything about China. I had no prior experience. I just had read all the stories about China's rise and the new competing superpower, and I didn't understand any of it, but it was just all over the headlines. I thought, okay, this is something that could give me unique value in the world and open up a whole new perspective.
Sure.
So I started studying my freshman year, and it was really effing hard. It was really hard. So I was like, you know what? If I'm going to spend the time to learn this language, and after just one semester in my freshman year, I knew that it was going to be a multi-year commitment and need to become a priority and a pillar of my life. You can't learn that language passively. It needs to be an active commitment. So I was fortunate, and one of the beautiful things about Amherst College and a lot of colleges in the U.S. is there really is a lot of free money if you look for it. There's a lot of scholarship dollars and random fellowships, and I was fortunate, and I got a scholarship to go for the summer after my freshman year to Hangzhou, China, and teach English in exchange for free Chinese courses. Because I wanted to make sure if I'm going to spend the time to really commit to this, I had never been to China, and I wanted to make sure that I actually was interested in building part of my life there. So I went that summer. And then I think people always expect some nuanced answer of the great meaning I found in it and the passion that I found. But the truth is, I just had a lot of fun. It was my first time. I was 18 years old. I was living by myself in China. It was like the wild, wild East. Everything was new. It was such an adventure. I met incredible people, both local and other expats. Everybody there had a story. I feel like there are many expats who start, they're traveling in Europe or they're traveling in South America, and they have so much fun and it's so sexy. They say, you know what, I want to stay. But in China, you don't find those people who just out of convenience or for fun, they end up in China. It seems like everybody there is there very intentionally, because it's hard. Life there is hard. It's chaotic, and it's aggressive, and it's scrappy, and it's different, and parts of it are uncomfortable. And I found that the folks that were there, the other foreigners, I mean, they were there for a reason. They really cared about life. And it was the first time in my short life that I had been part of a community that had so much conviction about life and just lived so intentionally. So I had a great time, and I went back to Amherst and started studying Chinese more earnestly, and I found opportunities to go there every summer, and I worked hard and kept learning. And by the time I left Amherst, I was speaking pretty competently, but in the way that a good student does. I mean, I went there as I was spent a lot of time in the classroom. I learned the grammar, I learned the vocabulary, and I learned, I think, the fullest extent what you can in a classroom. But it was only when I really moved to China full time, post college, and started building my life there, that I was able to get that step function to really integrate. But along the way, I mean, I think that it was incredibly supportive, even along that journey when I was learning. Is I think that folks, and this isn't unique to China, but I think wherever you go, when people can see that you're trying and trying at something hard, they're generally supportive. If they can tell that your heart is in it, your intentions are in it, and you're making an effort. I found that it was very much a positive reinforcement cycle and a nice validation loop. As I was trying and improving and getting better, I got a lot. I felt special. People would appreciate that and congratulate me or support me or help me, it really fed itself.
And when you so this is your first real job, is with DJI, right? That's your first real job. So you and very quickly, it sounds like you're trusted in the company to not only, I guess, have a lot of responsibility, but also to, represent the company in all these countries and with all these like big companies. That had to be kind of heady.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I was 24 and was so excited and got to travel and represent this billion-dollar company.
Right.
And I think I gained a lot of that trust because of the time and energy I invested in China and understanding China and really trying to be a part of it and not trying to exploit it transactionally. But I was building a life there, and And through the journey of learning the language, I learned the history, the politics, the culture, and I think that came through very genuinely, and I think that earned me some trust. At the same time, I mean, DJI was a Chinese company, and they were trying to build an international brand and image, and they didn't have that many employees that could speak competently, confidently to the Western world.
Oh, okay.
So I think that part of it was just timing, and also I was also willing to say yes. I didn't have any obligations. I had no family, no girlfriend, no nothing, and I was willing to get on the plane at any time, take long trains, and I just kind of said yes.
Yeah. Yes to every opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you decided to leave with these two engineers, how is it? So I'm talking about how is it that, again, this is heady, I guess, but how is it that you're the CEO in like, it's just kind of I don't know, it's amazing to me, Eli, that you hook up with these guys. I'm assuming they were older than you, but I don't know that for sure, but I'm assuming. And you start a company in China, you're the CEO, and you grow it fast, and you're able to also, you're basically an unproven guy, and you're able to get all this venture capital and stuff. How were you able to do that? And how were you trusted?
Yeah. So again, I mean, half the battle, I think, is just being there and showing up and putting yourself out there. I mean, there weren't that many Westerners in Shenzhen who spoke fluent English and Chinese, who worked in technology, who, and at DJI, I got to build a network pretty quickly. And I was in a pretty high profile position that was very public facing, that made me seem much higher on the totem pole than I was. And I think I was pretty good at projecting confidence and commanding that attention. And I was there, and I built relationships, and when we went to go build this battery company, I mean, we were going to manufacture and build product in China, but our market was the West. Our market was primarily the US and Europe. And I think part of it was just my ability to speak to our market, whereas my two partners were engineers, and they were several years older. But I think it was rare and unique for them to find someone like me that could give them their international exposure. There's so many brilliant Chinese engineers, but they have no ability to access the outside world. They don't even know where to start. They don't know how to do that. And what we did is, when I joined them, we spent just several months in product development, just kind of sketching out our product and our supply chain. And we raised a small seed round. And then I helped them launch a simple Indiegogo campaign, a crowdfunding campaign. In our first month, we grossed over $1 million on Indiegogo, and we were one of the top performing campaigns of the entire year.
Oh my God.
And then we used that to launch into a larger venture round and really expand our business. But even that, which, I mean, it took a lot of work, and I needed a lot of help along the way, and enlisted a lot of support. But even that simple step to get that visibility, to launch a crowdfunding campaign in the US, to build the right collateral, build the right video, put the right team together, speak to that end customer, that's something that they couldn't access on their own. So I think really it was being there, and being willing to take that risk.
And ultimately, so you got your manufacturing facilities, 100 employees, you're raising all kinds of money. And you mentioned, when you were answering the how did it happen question, that you in the last fundraising round, you get blindsided as I guess a condition of the funding. I'm not sure what the control mechanism was, but all of a sudden you're out. And you described a little bit about how that felt, but I'm wondering why it happened. Do you know why that came to be?
It's I've thought about this every which way, and my answer would probably change as month to month over the last year and a half.
Okay.
I mean, the business was struggling. It was. I mean, we were not profitable. We were raising money, growing, but we were not profitable. I had opened an office in San Francisco, and we had about 15 employees in San Francisco, and that was a much more it was much more expensive. I think our 15-person office in San Francisco was burning more cash than our 100-person office in Shenzhen. There was the trade war between Chairman Xi and President Trump, and the tariffs had increased, and there was a little bit of tension between China and the U.S., or not a little bit, there was a lot of tension between China and the U.S. So there was the trade war, the tariffs went up, the capital markets tightened. We were kind of burning cash. The U.S. office was expensive. We had just raised money from a lot of state-owned enterprises in China that were very, very domestically focused. And I think that the board made a decision to make a fundamental pivot in the identity and structure of the company. And I think, to be honest, I mean, I was there for 3.5 years, and I set up all of their sales channels, the same ones that they're doing today. And I set up all of their customer support infrastructure, their logistics infrastructure, and it was running fairly smoothly. I think I had set up an operation and built a foundation that was fairly sustainable and kind of operating like a machine. It needed a little grease every now and then, but that infrastructure was there. And I think, to be honest, they felt like they could capture that value back to mainland China, and it wasn't as necessary, and my value wasn't as critical at that point. So it was heartbreaking. I remember I flew back and was totally blindsided, and it was December 7th, and I was told to fire the entire San Francisco office and close it immediately. And I had promised everyone a bonus, a raise, more equity grants. And what's wild is, I mean, just I guess at my age, I was quite naive, and it was my first go around, and I didn't even realize that something like that could happen out of my control. I didn't realize that those were decisions that could just be made. And at the end of the day, I mean, there's a board, and I'm one vote on the board. And we had people who had put a lot of money up. So I had to let go the entire team, people I had made all these promises to, and had to renege on my own commitments to them. And I burned a lot of bridges, and I didn't have a choice. I mean, and it was heartbreaking. I mean, I cried more that week than I've ever cried in my life.
And did you feel like the people in the office believed you, or did you feel like, I mean, how could they not? You're
yeah.
I don't know what
they believed me, but I guess that they felt like I had given them a false sense of confidence. That they didn't, like me, they didn't realize that something like that could happen out of my control. So they felt a little bit misled in the autonomy and control that I projected. So they knew that was, of course, against my will, but they did feel misled. Yeah.
And how, I mean, you talked about the therapy and all that stuff, but I'm just wondering, as a co-founder of the business, how do your other co-founders feel about what happened to you, I guess? And then you look back and you're probably thinking to yourself, man, I was this close to being a part of the ride that you described, going from, basically having to, constantly raise funds in order to keep the lights on and keep the traction going until, I guess, you hit a certain point or whatever, which it sounds like maybe the company's hit. I don't know. How are the co-founders, your co-founders? They're still with the business. They're still part of it.
I feel like, I mean, the rhetoric is, Eli, like, we love you. You're like our brother, but wasn't our decision. This is a board decision, and we have to do what's right for the business. You have to separate business from personal. Yeah, it was cutthroat. I think they were scared, right? The company was struggling at the time, and we got these new investors that put up the money, and we all, I mean, we all were in debt. All three of us had taken out loans and put money into the company. And they were several years older than I was, but not too much older, but they're still fairly young. And they both had, one of them had a young child, the other one was about to have a baby. And I mean, their skin was in that game, and I think they were scared. I don't think it was malicious. I think it was, in their eyes, it was just matter of fact, and that's how business is done. And I learned a really hard lesson about, one, understanding the limits to my own position in the company, and in my own control, and protecting myself contractually and legally. I also learned that even if I had good instincts about an opportunity, if you're not surrounded by the right people, that doesn't matter. So I do think it validated my instincts about opportunity. Like I said, that company is now $1 billion company, which is incredible. And nobody can take away from me that I started that. I was the first one to take the leap. I was a co-founder. I drove this forward. I built that foundation, and no one can take that away from me. And I think I had the right instincts about the market, just not the people.
Got it.
But it led me to now, right?
Yeah.
And,
So where did you land? So you lose the position, you lose your shares in the company. They buy them out. You said for a nominal amount. And do you leave China at that point too and go somewhere else? Where do you land?
I went back to my hometown, Santa Barbara, California,
Okay.
where I had never been since I was 17 years old. And I moved back in with my dad and started seeing a therapist and figuring out my life again. I started doing a little bit of volunteer teaching at my old public high school. I started seeing a therapist. I was doing some consulting work. Just kind of, I mean, my whole identity was wrapped up in that venture EcoFlow and this idea of Eli, the entrepreneur, Eli, the China guy. And I felt like the world
Forbes
and
under
around
30
me had these expectations of me that I failed. And I felt like I let everyone down, I felt like I let myself down. But I think the reality is that nobody cares. And everyone's, I think, if anything, it admires the fact that I did that and is proud, and they don't care that I didn't end up, becoming a billionaire. And I think it took me a while to realize that. But I had to kind of rebuild my own identity in the absence of EcoFlow, because that became so core to me.
That is such a great point that you just made there. You can really beat yourself up over things that happen, whether it's embarrassment or whether it's, questioning your adequacy or, all of those kinds of things. We get those in our head and we think, oh, everybody's looking at me, thinks the same way about me that I'm thinking about me. And truth is, as you said, people don't really care. So if you can get over it yourself, people will welcome you back and be like, hey, look, what else can we do together? Or, right, you had this tremendous run. You must know something. Let's do something, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it did lead me to the now. And without that experience, I would not be on this journey with R0, with my two partners who I just think the world of and admire and respect as professionals, as people. And I couldn't be more grateful. And I think what we're doing now has orders of magnitude more potential than what I was doing previously.
Okay. And how did your dad feel when you showed up and, we're like, hey, Dad, I've been running this huge company over in China. Now I just want to crash with you for a little while, if that's okay.
He's my biggest fan. He thinks I walk on water. I hung the moon. Yeah. Nice. He was just thrilled to have me back. And I feel very lucky about that. But he is almost delusional in his ideas of grandeur about me, which I feel so lucky.
Yeah, that helps. That's for sure. Yeah. So you're going through this period of transition, mourning, whatever, introspection, all of these things, and what happens for you to connect with your co-founders now at R0?
Yeah, so shortly after the pandemic, I got a call from Grant Morgan, who's one of my co-founders in the business. It was February of 2020, and I actually met Grant almost 7 years ago in China when I was working for DJI. Grant at the time, he was on the founding team of a company called iCracked. They were a decentralized network of highly skilled electronic technicians, and they would repair equipment in the field. And Grant and I talked about doing a program for his company iCracked to repair DJI drones in the field. And the program actually never materialized. We never ended up building that partnership. But I met Grant. I was at DJI, and I still at that time had fantasies of being an entrepreneur. And Grant was in Silicon Valley. He had raised a bunch of money from Anderson Horowitz and all the big names. And he was just a small step ahead of me in personal life and professional life. And he was close enough in age that he felt very relatable, but did have a chunk more experience in all senses of the word. And I really admired him, and he kind of became a peer mentor of mine. So we stayed in touch over the last 7 years. And as I went on my journey with my first venture, I used Grant for a lot of emotional and tactical coaching. And we stayed kind of friends and acquaintances, and he saw my whole journey through and through. And I think he saw the value in the journey I had that I couldn't quite acknowledge yet when I was so close to it.
Right.
So when he started ideating on R0 with our other partner, Ben Boyer, he called me right away. And the three of us launched. And this journey was really catalyzed by COVID. We were conceived in response to COVID, but now what we're doing is far beyond that. And it's been exciting. But Grant, I've known for many years, and we have that base trust and appreciation for each other. And he's known Ben for many years. But Ben is a venture capitalist by training, or he actually founded a venture capital fund that manages $1.5 billion. They've raised 7 funds. But he invested in Grant's former company, iCracked, and sat on the board. So he saw Grant through his entrepreneurial journey through a sale of iCracked to Allstate. And then Grant saw me through my journey, and there was that connected tissue and trust, and I think mutual admiration.
So where did the idea, you talked about ideating, where did it come from? So basically, as I understand it, the company has taken technology that's been used in hospitals, for example, for many years for disinfection, and had this idea, you guys had this idea, or someone did, to make that less expensive and more available to the masses, so to speak, to make sure to I guess revolutionize the way that cleaning and disinfection are done in all kinds of structures, not just hospitals. Am I on the right path there?
Yeah. So I think in the wake of COVID, I mean, we saw the world respond with chemicals, and we started looking at the disinfection industry as a whole. And the industry is very literally hundreds of billions of dollars market cap. Disinfection is a massive industry, and it's governed by Ecolab, Clorox, SC Johnson, Diversey. All of these companies are over 100 years old. Right. And they all push chemicals, more or less. And in 1918, with the Spanish flu, we responded by using chemicals. And today we're doing the same thing. And it's all manual. It's very labor intensive. Chemicals are horrible for the environment. They only treat surfaces, not the air. And we said, why hasn't this industry evolved? This is one of the last major industries that has not been touched by any modern technologies. So we got in touch with Dr. Richard Wade, and Dr. Wade ran Cal OSHA for 15 years. And we actually convinced him to join us as a shareholder. And he led us on a study to really understand what are the best tools that exist today in the hospital setting, in surgical environments where we have the highest risk, and why haven't those tools been expanded to other commercial markets? And what are the limitations of those tools, and how can we improve them with modern technology? So that was kind of I guess our starting point. And what we did is we landed on UVC lights, which have been used in hospitals for quite literally decades, and they're wildly effective. The hospitals that use UVC lights in operating rooms, they have 93% fewer infections than the hospitals that don't. And the reason it's never been used in other markets is one, is that nobody's ever cared, and two, is that they're extremely cost prohibitive, because the pricing is an artifact of our healthcare system, and it does not have anything to do with the bill of materials and what it costs to manufacture these. Right. So we raised our a seed round and a Series A from the same backers as Tesla and SpaceX, and in 5 months we brought a product to market that unequivocally, fundamentally outputs more light and is more effective than any product being sold into hospitals today. And we priced it based off the bill of materials, not extorting value from the healthcare system. So we built a piece of hardware that was darn good, and unequivocally was the market leader in terms of performance and price. But where we actually innovated, and what's really interesting, and I'll talk a little bit about shortly, is the software. So we're the first company to embed a Verizon LTE chip. And what you can do with that is you can actually transmit real-time data, and you can actually generate an audit trail around disinfection. And you can see where the system was run, what time, by who, what room, and you actually generate an audit trail around what was done in that space. Because if you think about it right now, in terms of compliance, you send crews to go disinfect rooms, to go clean rooms, and they sign a log. Or if they're really fancy, they might scan a QR code. Yeah. But there's no way of actually validating what was done. So not only are we offering the best tools in the world to disinfect at an affordable price, and there's no chemicals, and there's no labor, we're also transmitting real-time data. So for the first time, you have visibility into this process. So a school can see, okay, classroom 17 was disinfected at 9 o'clock last night, but the teacher's lounge was missed. Or if you're checking into a hotel, you can see that your hotel room was disinfected before you showed up. Same thing with a yoga class. Or if you're going to work in an office space, I think employers are not going to have a responsibility to keep their employees safer. So it's this ability to generate data around disinfection activities. So that was the first product we launched. And we're now in thousands of schools, commercial real estate, corporate offices, jails, restaurants, hotels, sports teams. It's just taken off. Sorry, go ahead.
And what's the difference? First of all, this is a simple question, but I think a lot of people don't understand the difference. What's the difference between, let's take a hotel room, for example. What's the difference between cleaning a hotel room and disinfecting a hotel room?
So cleaning is the physical removal of particulate. It's removing dirt, taking out the trash, mopping up a spill. That is cleaning. It is physically removing particulate, but it has nothing to do with inactivating or killing a microorganism. Disinfecting is actually killing the pathogen, whatever is there. It has nothing to do with the removal of it. It's killing it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, so we have a little something in common, but different. So I've been in the waste business my whole career, and we have a division where we clean factories, but not like the floor, vacuuming the floors, but doing real cleaning of machinery and pits and tanks and all of that kind of stuff. But when COVID hit, there was a need for disinfection. So we started to understand how to do that. And we actually used a chemical. We used a hydrogen peroxide solution. And we cleaned a lot of factories and a lot of offices and, all kinds of stuff. But the way, so ours was a contact application where we actually sprayed onto surfaces, and that killed the virus, or at least that's what it was intended to do. Your technology is totally different from that. You already went through that you're not using chemicals, and we were, but I wonder, and it's not a new technology, as you said, it's been around for a long time, but how does the UVC actually work? I mean, again, let's take whether it's a hotel room or a school. How does it work? What should people know about it?
Yeah,
in terms of work.
So in 1903, the Nobel Prize for Medicine was awarded to the discovery of the germicidal properties of UVC. There is no known microorganism on the planet that is UVC resistant. In the 1910s, we started using UVC in wastewater treatment, the 1920s in HVAC, the 1940s in hospitals. So the sun produces UVA, B, and C, but UVC is at a wavelength that can't penetrate the Earth's atmosphere. So it never actually makes it to the surface of the Earth naturally. So because of that, no organism on the planet, no virus, bacteria, mold, fungi has ever evolved to be able to resist UVC light. So at that wavelength,
because there's no exposure. So they can't. Okay.
So when we manufacture it here on Earth artificially, we manufacture this light. It can penetrate the cell walls of any microorganism, and it ruptures the DNA or RNA so that cell can't replicate. So you're inactivating it so that it cannot reproduce, and it does that by penetrating the cell walls and rupturing DNA and RNA. So one thing about that is, like I said, no microorganism has ever developed resistance. So because of that, long-term exposure can be damaging to human skin and eyes because we're made up of cells and organisms. So nobody can be in the room when these systems are running. And what we're doing in our whole future and where we're moving as a business is, if you think about disinfection today, there's a couple major issues. One is that it's very expensive. There's a huge labor cost to send people around disinfect. And there's a huge chemical cost. And what we can do with UVC light is remove the labor and chemical cost entirely. And the other thing that we're doing is, right now, most cleaning disinfection is done based on time. So every night you send your crew out. Every week you send your crew out. But that may or may not have anything to do with risk. So what we're looking to do is we're actually start moving towards fixtures, installed assets around the building. So these are installed UVC lights. And then we have sensors all around the space that can capture utilization data. So you can see where people go. So you can see what spaces were used throughout the day. So if nobody used that conference room, don't send your crew to clean it. If 10 people use that bathroom, it doesn't matter if it's been 2 hours or 2 days, send your crew in there. So we have an opportunity to get smarter about when and where to clean. And then we can even automate some of the disinfection. So with that sensor data, we can automate those lights to turn on and off. So we're removing the labor and chemical component entirely. And then we're also generating automatic work orders so your janitorial crews can go around and clean based on risk and usage, not based on time. So there will be a great labor efficiency.
Okay. So I get it. That's really smart. So being able to track the usage of the room, that's really smart. I've seen that done in like cafeterias and that kind of thing for the same reason, to track demand and make sure you're managing things correctly and all. But I guess one of the things that I'm sort of curious about is if you've got these installed units, which makes sense, but the clean, like in that bathroom you mentioned, the cleaning still has to be done. The physical cleaning still has to be done, and that has to be done based on usage. So how do you see this working? Like the physical crew comes in and cleans, and then when they're gone, the disinfection starts, Eli, or how does it practically work? Because it doesn't do everything. It only
So you still need to clean, right? But you
right.
using your labor more efficiently and only sending them to clean when they actually need to clean.
Okay.
And then that disinfection is automated, so there's no longer any labor component. So yes, it would run post cleaning.
Okay, and what's the coverage area of your UVCs, for example? Because one of the things that you mentioned that the exposure is dangerous. They also traditionally, I think, like in a hospital setting, they're on casters and they're moved around to different areas so that they can, because there's a limited footprint, I guess. So how does the coverage work?
So our flagship product, ARC, is the same fundamentally product category as what you see in hospitals. So it's
Okay.
6.5 foot light tower on 4 locking casters, and you wheel it from room to room. And this is not unique to our product. The ability for UVC to kill any pathogen is the amount of light that you emit times time, and different pathogens take different amounts of dosage to inactivate. And because we output more light, we built a system that outputs more light. We can have shorter cycle times to achieve the same kill. So relative to competitors, our advantage is the cycle time. We can achieve the same kill in less time. So we can do 1,000 square feet in 6 minutes, and that will inactivate any pathogen in the room to a 4 log kill. So that's 99.99% kill of any pathogen in 1,000 square foot room in 6 minutes. So what generally happens is that this becomes part of the toolkit of your janitorial staff. So they would go into the first room, they clean it, they pick up any trash, wipe any spills, they do that cleaning. At the end of the cleaning, they wheel this in, they press a button, and it runs a 3, 5, 6, 10-minute cycle, depending on the size of the room. And while it's running, they're in the next room cleaning. And by the time they finish cleaning that second room, the cycle's over. They go back and they wheel that device from the first room to the second. So it trails them from room to room. And so it does add a couple minutes of touch time. It adds a few minutes of touch time to your cleaning process, but it's much more efficient than manually disinfecting a room, which could take many minutes.
And so you, for the hotel room example or whatever, those are less than conference rooms. Those are less than 1,000 square feet. So you're talking about, a few minutes in each one of those types of environments. Now, could that machine be, automated so that it's, whether it's robotic or whatever, and you could map out a whole floor of an office and just have it go? I mean, is that part of the plan, or is it, I mean, I know you said you were going to install things too, which might be the solution to that as opposed to the robotics. I'm just curious how you take the person out of it and automate the whole thing.
The future will be installed assets, definitely.
Installed.
Building a robotic solution is possible, but the battery life isn't there. The cost just gets way too high. And the truth is the robots just aren't quite smart enough yet. And there's often a lot of issues. So the future will be installed assets. Right now it is on wheels, but what we can do is, because our device is intelligent, we can actually pre-program an entire facility floor plan into the device. So all you do is select what room you're in, and it's automatically calibrated to run the correct cycle time in that room. So the janitorial staff, at first we wanted to design it with an embedded iPad and a touch screen and make it really fancy and sexy. And then we realized that most of our staff is English second language, very high turnover, often not much formal education. They don't always have a smartphone. So our design target was a microwave. We wanted to take out all the sophistication and make this as easy as possible to operate. You wheel it around, you select the room, and you press go, and that's it. And then on the back end, we collect all that data and we generate real-time reports that the facilities management can look at in real time and cut up and filter any way they'd like. But the operation is dead simple.
And what is the difference between UVC light used the way you just described and sort of the UVC installed into HVAC systems, or an ozone type system installed into HVAC systems? How do differently do they, or do those work? I see them, I guess would be my main question to you, because you see them.
Yeah, there are many good products out there. There also are many not so great products out there. One of the interesting things is that the UVC market is unregulated. There's a lot of science that validates the efficacy of UVC as technology. That body of evidence is overwhelming, crystal clear over 100 years, but there is no product certification required to go to market. So there are some great companies, and there are also some not so great companies that make claims about UVC as a technology, but not about their product efficacy. So it's really important to look at third-party lab data and make sure that product actually has validation from third-party labs. But the use case in HVAC, it does work, but the issue is that it's local. It has nothing to do with the air in that space. It's disinfected as it gets brought up to the central HVAC. So it's not, so there's still a high risk in that environment on these surfaces in the air at that time.
Okay. And what's the business model? Like, are you leasing these devices? Are you selling these devices? You working through distributors?
We call it hardware as a service. It's a subscription model. So again, our goal was to democratize access to these technologies. So you can sign up for 1, 2, or 3 year subscriptions, and it's paid monthly. And that includes access to all hardware, all software, firmware upgrades, customer service. So we wanted to lower the barrier to entry and really get this in as many people's hands as possible. I mean, we are definitely a socially driven company. We're actually a double bottom line company. And that means that we've signed a pledge to social impact. That first bottom line is we need to be sustainable and operating as a business. That second bottom line is social impact. So we actually, we've signed this pledge where we adhere to certain protocol. So we manufacture in the US, the vast majority of our supply chain is US based, all of our services here, all of our, we hire very diversely, all of our offices are low income zones. So we really are trying to do good. and get this in as many people's hands as possible.
And how are you selling it, Eli? Is it through your own salespeople or through how do you?
Yeah, we work both with a direct sales force and channel partners. So we have a fairly diversified model. But we're growing fast. I mean, we've only been on the market 3 quarters, and we've done about $20 million in bookings. So it's just
awesome.
And for a hardware enterprise company, that is unbelievable. Like maybe some sexy consumer software, maybe you see that, but in this world, enterprise hardware, I mean, it's getting to $20 million in less than a year. That is something that we're very proud of, and it's very unique.
Yeah, it's phenomenal growth. Congratulations on that. I'm wondering about 2 things. One, how do you want people to find out more or connect with you or whatever? We'll go there first.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. I mean, we're fighting hard, and the more support, the more visibility, the better. Our website is r0.com, rzero.com. We have quite a robust site, and I think some really a wealth of information on the science, the applications, the use cases, on partners we have. And then if you want to find me on LinkedIn, my name is Eli Harris, in R0, R-Zero, and I'd be happy to connect.
And that is how Eli and I connected initially. I guess last question, because I know you're up against a hard stop. In the last year and, say March through it's now July, so what's that, 15 months or something like that, your life has changed again, very dramatically. So what's going on inside of you? How are you feeling about yourself, and how are you feeling about your future and all?
Yeah, so I've definitely learned to take more pride in the journey, understanding that there's always going to be stuff that's out of my control. So I'm trying to take more pride in what I can control, and who I am, and what my value is, and the journey that I've had. Because I mean, you can never expect any outcome. And then I think part of me also has a chip on my shoulder, right? I was so close last time, and I didn't get it, and I hate being a victim, but I do feel like I was taken advantage of, and now I'm hungry. I want to win. I want to prove that what I'm doing now is bigger, better, greater. I definitely am channeling some of that anger still into fuel, and I want to win. I really do, and I think what we're doing now is special, and I'm working harder than ever, and I really do believe in this. But I'm still trying to maintain some clinical aspect and some separation of self from my role at the company, to make sure I don't lose sight of who I am and in my own self-esteem.
Well, it sounds to me like, 1, you are definitely hungry. 2,
oh, yeah.
That chip on your shoulder, you wear it well, because what happened to you seems like a tragedy, something that, anybody that's been fired from a job, that's one thing. That's hard. But being, let go from something you started and founded and ran and got to a point that was, just on the cusp of being super successful is super hard. So I give you a lot of credit for that. I do thank you so much for being on the show today, and love what you're doing. And I'm glad we had a chance to share it. I'm really invested in the idea of what you're doing personally. So I think it's really cool. We'll see where it'll be a great thing to see where this ends up and where you end up as well.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I really am working hard, and I've got my whole heart in this. So I appreciate the opportunity to tell the story.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How'd It Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at mikemalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How'd It Happen podcast.